All right, accelerating SNIA Swordfish implementations through open source tools, the SMI Lab and Swordfish CTP program. Rochelle Olvers was originally going to be doing this session, but unfortunately she's not able to be here today. So I'm going to be presenting this for you today. Let's go ahead and dig right into it. There's a lot of great stuff in here. We're going to talk about, you've probably read the abstract, as well as the learning objectives. And again, you're here, so obviously you've had a chance to read those. No need to waste time going over this again. But the idea is we're going to go over what the Swordfish program is and how it works. So the key is you want to be able to use mock-ups and develop POCs, and you want to be able to do a CI/CD, and you want to be able to roll these implementations very, very quickly to find out what's wrong. So CTP is perfectly suited for this, to be able to develop often, develop early, find problems fast, and be able to fix those problems fast. The spec and the schema are easy to understand. Swordfish and Redfish tools are out there to help you guys understand these. But the key is, once you build your implementation, bringing your implementation to the SNIA, the SMI, the Storage Management Lab for interoperability testing is a great way to go. Once you're a member of SM Lab, the CTP comes to you for free. It's a free offering at that point because you're a member of the lab. So CTP conformance programming can be used to help you accelerate your implementation. It's also used secondarily to be able to show people out in the real world that you're compliant with the protocol. So vendors many times are going to implement a Swordfish API. They're going to run the testing program. They're going to use open source testing program. They're going to validate vendor neutral conformance. The key is, it's one thing for your programmers to all say, we're compatible, we're compliant, we're this, we're that. People like that, but at the same time, having a third party actually test this and be able to come back with a vendor neutral conformance certification that really can help you guys out in the real world. Because we want to make sure that you guys are accepted by vendors who want to actually consume Swordfish. So it's a vendor neutral suite to validate the conformance. It'll find all kinds of things. It'll find things that don't follow spec. And what I mean by that is it can find things for like misspellings of things. It can find things like you're putting a value in that's not actually allowed by the spec. There's a lot of things it will actually look for and actually repair for you. It'll actually point all these out, at which point you would actually go and fix those bugs, run it again, and just iteratively keep doing that until the thing comes out clean. Once you've got a clean run, you know you're compliant with the spec. There's also built-in open source tools that help make this a better reality in that sense. And again, once you run this automated testing, you can actually pass this and actually publicize this as well. CTP is all about increasing on interoperability. You may have a Swordfish implementation that works perfectly fine. What you may not have is a Swordfish implementation that works perfectly fine when it's inserted into a location where the vendor wrote the tool for another, where the consumer wrote his tool for another vendor. What I mean by that is, let's say we have vendor A, and you have a company like SolarWinds or Splunk or one of these companies that comes in and writes a tool for vendor A. The key is, if they wrote the tool for vendor A and vendor A was Swordfish compatible, and you bring your product in and you know it's compatible, it should work. On the other hand, if you write your tool and don't make sure it's compatible, it's really iffy on whether it's going to work or not, because little differences can make entire tool sets stop working. And you don't necessarily have the ability to debug the code that a third party produces to exploit your Swordfish compatibility. So for instance, a Splunk or a SolarWinds or one of those companies comes in, all they know is that you didn't work. Conformance testing fixes that. It helps you ensure that your stuff's going to work from the start. And again, this is a self-test process. You actually run the test and submit the test results to us. And again, it's a very easy thing to automate as well. So being able to check this in, check in new code, have it automatically run, actually spit out the results to you is a very easy thing to do. There's logos as well. We have SNIA conformant. And then we also have the identifiable logos so that you can actually say what version of the protocol you're conformant against. For instance, we may add new features in the protocol in 1.2.5, and you may want to say, I am compatible with 1.2.5 and newer. Now, generally, everything's compatible backwards. So if I have some Swordfish client that runs basic Swordfish, if I'm compliant with 1.2.2, 1.2.3, 1.2.4, 1.2.5, it's going to work across the board. The key is that a client may actually make a call that requires 1.2.5, at which point he'd be looking for that. So you may want to put your version, and in fact, it's nice because you can actually conform as a new version comes out, rerun that CTP test, get the new logo with the new number. So what's covered by the test? There's a few things you have to implement. You have to implement OData, which is part of Redfish, you have to do that anyways, and the metadata options. And there are some required properties in the schema that you must implement. You also must make sure that all the URIs are valid. You can't produce a volume collection that has 3 volumes that actually return 404 errors. Because obviously the thing is going to spider through your entire implementation, look for every OData and walk down them and verify them. So everything has to actually resolve out. And again, the conformance testing is going to test against profiles as well. So you don't have to test against every profile, you just test against the profile you want to. And there's inherency. So the first profile you want to be able to test against is discovery. You need to be able to discover that you have a Swordfish implementation out there. At that point, you can say, well, I'm an NVMe vendor. I'm going to do NVMe drive and NVMe front end and NVMe Ethernet attached and NVMe advanced features. But I don't really care about block provisioning. So I'm not going to do that profile. So you can test and be conformant to certain parts of the protocol that you feel are necessary for your implementation without having to do everything in the protocol. This gives you the ability to put in the things that make sense for you, not necessarily have to burn the entire protocol into your product. Now the framework is on screen here. The self-test results are actually really, really well written in the sense that we have help built in, and there are actually examples of how to use this stuff. It checks compliance using the mockups. And in fact, all the CTP programs are run against the mockups as well to be sure the mockups are compliant. So that way you know the mockups are compliant, you know the CTP is working, and at the same time you can actually run the CTP against your own implementations as well. So again, fully bundled, the testing framework is there and usable. The test results are going to look a lot like this. So you can see that certain things are going to pass, certain things are going to fail or not be tested at all. This is what the final testing conformance program results would look like that SNIA could post on your behalf. Now again, you can run CTP anytime you want. You do not have to let us publish anything. You have to authorize us to publish anything you want published about your product. Otherwise, it doesn't get out there. So the nice thing about that is running the CTP test is low risk for your company. If you run CTP, there's no worry that the public's going to know that you don't pass this yet or that doesn't work yet. The idea is to make sure that you guys know yourselves what does and doesn't work. At that point, you at least know there's a problem, you at least know there's something you can fix. Once you fix it, come back, retest again, and then publish. The key is we're not here to embarrass vendors, we're here to empower vendors. So again, publish results. Categorizes base Redfish, Swordfish, and only the past features are submitted. We don't publish failed features. The key is we're not here to embarrass vendors. We're here to make sure your lives are easy. And there's a service validator that checks general compliance to the schema as well. And again, there's a lot of features that are optional. You don't have to implement them. If you do implement them, it should be implemented correctly. So maybe the right answer is, I don't pass this test because I didn't implement this optional feature properly. Well, take it out of your test. Take it out of your implementation and only put it back in when you actually know you can pass it, because you can actually get that list down to just greens and just what you want. Now, the messages are generally not that hard to read. And in fact, there's logs that go with them. So when something does fail, we'll tell you what test it failed and why it failed. In rough idea. Didn't conform because of blah. You used the wrong case sensitivity here. You misspelled this word. There's going to be a lot of reasons why something could fail. We try and make sure that all that stuff is logged, because the tool is there to be your test structure, the test extension to your own dev people. And again, you can test individual features as well. You don't have to run the entire test. You could run subtests, subsections. This shows you kind of what these results look like. When you just want to test one feature, you add one feature to your code. Why run the whole test bed against it? Just test that one feature you just added. See what happens. So the question is, are you ready to participate? We are now working with groups. In fact, if you send an email to storagemanagement@snia.org, we're working with groups to try and make sure that Swordfish CTP is available to you all the time. So the idea is, if you join the SNIA Labs, the SMI Lab, CTP is available all the time. It's actually part of the lab fee now. We no longer charge a separate fee for that if you're a member of the lab. We're trying to make this very easy to test and very easy to be conformant. Now, the SMI Lab, or the SM Lab, also coexists with DMTF. DMTF also has equipment there as well. But we're partners with a lot of different groups, so there's a lot of hardware that's in there. And again, the SM Lab is symbiotic with the Swordfish compliance program. That's where it actually happens to live. The easiest way to get your CTP testing done is to put it in the SNIA Labs, at which point any help that you need, you don't have to let us VPN into your environment. We're automatically in the SNIA Labs. And we could have everybody who's in SNIA Labs help out with trying to figure out what's going on. We can also do virtual plug fests. If you want to invite a certain number of vendors in, if you want to invite the management vendors out there who want to actually talk to your Swordfish device that is CTP compatible, that's the place to do it as well. They can actually see exactly what you've implemented. They can actually run against your hardware to make sure that they're talking to your hardware properly. And then we have a lot more information on DMTF, Swordfish, the Open Fabric Alliance, and NVMe Express. And again, this is a lot of information. There's a lot of places to download information from. But realize CTP is about enforcing Redfish. Up till now, Redfish hasn't had a way to enforce good behavior and protocol compliance. This is the way. This is the way to make sure that all vendors are adhering to the spec. If the spec is wrong, that's great. We can all talk about that and fix the spec. But first, let's get everyone following the spec. Once everyone's following the spec, then we can talk about the fact that we should be doing something different, that we need to make sure that we're compliant. We need to make sure that we're all following the same spec, that we all work the same to all the clients out there who want to consume Swordfish. And that actually is the entire session. I know it's a rather short session, but this is all about CTP and making sure that you guys have access to this as a toolkit to make sure that you guys can test your implementations and actually run this in a very swift, agile way. Any questions?
Is there a file schedule for the custody test?
I couldn't hear that.
Oh, sorry. Is there a kind of schedule or plan to enforce custody transfer?
No, all vendors, if they want to run the tests, need to either submit their hardware into the SNIA Labs or run the test themselves, or you have to come to us. Nobody's going out there and finding implementations to run the SNIA tests against that are not vendor initiated.
What about the OpenStack software? For example, the EMC Lab on, on EMC, it's OpenStack, but applied to a certain hardware path, it's not the vendor.
Again, that vendor would have to say, I want to run CTP against it. It's not a matter of us running it against something outside of the vendor's control. You as a vendor, if you want CTP compliance, can ask the vendor, hey, can you guys run these tests? I want to see what the results are. But SNIA cannot force any vendor to run these, nor would we ever run these without the permission of the vendor whose equipment it is.
Do we have an initial idea who already planned or already get the program, testing the program?
No. And again, even if we did, we can't talk about people running CTP unless they are willing to actually publish their results. I can tell you the CTP has been run against hardware. Just can't tell you who, can't tell you when, can't tell you how often, because that's a breach until that vendor decides they want to publish their information. But it has been run against real hardware, not just mock-ups. Any other questions? I think that's it for the day then, for my sessions. Thank you for coming to the session. If you like my session, my name is Chris Linetti. And the deck was dutifully created and optimized by Rochelle Alvers, who did an excellent job on these. Thank you very much.